And welcome to Science. We're going to be talking about habitats today. A habitat is a natural environment where plants or animals or other organisms might live. In order for them to live in a certain habitat, they will need to have four major things. And those are food, water, shelter, and space. Let's take a look at some habitats together. This first habitat should look very familiar to you. This is Winnipeg. The thing about this is that we look at this and we go, well, it's a city and it'll have lots of people in it, a population of people. And while that's true, there is a population of people living in Winnipeg. We're not going to consider humans to be animals. And so what we're going to be looking for are the plant and animal populations that live in this particular habitat. What are some of the plants and animals that you might find in this habitat? Some of you may have said squirrels. Some of you may have seen rabbits. Maybe you've seen fish swimming through the rivers. Lots of birds, probably. Lots of different species of birds in there. We won't count pets either because we're going to be looking at wild animals. What about plants? I see that there's lots of greenery around the river, and then there's also some parks and stuff like that. We see trees, we see shrubs, we see lots of grass. There are lots of plants and animals living in this habitat. But what is the food that they eat? Well, some of the animals in there, like I think if there were foxes, they might eat rabbits. If there were birds, they might eat insects. They might eat berries produced by the trees. What do the trees eat? Well, they'll take their nutrients from the sun and from the soil itself. What about water? All plants and animals need water. Well, there's a big river flowing through Winnipeg right now, so it's probably easy to see where they get that from. And there's probably some standing ponds and lakes as well. And rain will offer some water as well. So we've got food, we've got water. What about shelter? The smaller animals will have shelter in the shrubs and probably in the trees. And I once had squirrels living in the rafters of the house that I was living in. So humans are actually providing some of those shelters for them. Some animals will have natural shelters. Think about turtles. Their shelter is probably going to be their shell. What about space? Well, the space that we're talking about is the room for them to grow. It's also the air that they breathe. And, well, there's lots of oxygen here, and in the river there might be some for the fish as well, so that they'll be able to survive. So we've got food, water, shelter, and space in a city habitat. Next, we've got this habitat. This is actually taken in the ocean in Hawaii. And you can obviously see that there's fish there already. What about plants? What kind of plants would you find in the ocean? For those of you that said algae and plankton, you're absolutely right. Those would be there. For our next habitat, we have the ocean. This picture that you're looking at right now is actually a photo that I took in Hawaii in the ocean. And you can see that there's fish in there, and there's actually lots of plant life here as well. There's a lot of algae growing in this ocean. There's also seaweed, and probably some other things as well. So we've got food for the fish, and the bacteria and organisms that are inside the water are going to feed the plants as well. So we've got food. Can you figure out where the water's coming from? I sure hope you did. It's the ocean. Come on, it's all water. What about shelter? Well, we've got rocks here for some of the smaller fish. And think about it. The ocean's a big place. And if it's a big place, there's probably a lot of space between regular fish and their predators, larger fish. So the ocean itself would become shelter for some of the plant and animal life that's there. What about space? Well, there's oxygen in the water, and there's lots of space and space for the plants and animals to grow in and to move around in. So I think that's covered as well. This is actually a photo I took of kind of a swampish area in Kentucky. And the canoe doesn't count for this particular exercise, so we're not going to look at the canoe because we're not counting humans as animals. But if you take a look, what kind of plants and animals would live in this type of habitat? Lots of frogs, lots of mosquitoes, and lots of flies. There's some deer in this area as well, lots of rabbits, a lot of rodents inside the ground, a lot of fish in the water, and there's lots of trees to see right here. There's a little bit of a forest growing in the background there as well. So what is the food? Well, for the frogs, it's going to be the flies and the mosquitoes and the insects and maybe small fish that are in the water. For the squirrels, it's going to be the nuts that are in the trees. And the trees are going to be able to grow from the water and the soil that's in the area as well. And there's plenty of space for all of these things to live together. So, is it a habitat? Sure is. Food, water, shelter, space. The fence doesn't count for this exercise. We've got a wide open field. We've got mountains in the background. What kind of things, what kind of plants and animals would we have living in this type of habitat? Mountain goats in the mountains. Probably have lots of prairie dogs in the fields itself. We've probably got lots of mosquitoes, lots of flies. This is taken in Alberta, by the way. We've got food, water, shelter, and space. This is taken in the Arctic. And this habitat is a little bit harder for us at first, but there's lots of food, water, shelter, and space here as well. The shelter is actually probably a lot of the adaptations of the animals that are here. Most of them are white, and that means that they're camouflaged against the background of the snow and ice. And that would be a shelter because it's a protection for them. The water is probably the snow itself as it melts from the sun, as well as just licking it or eating it. The food, well, there's actually algae that is growing here. There's also some plants that are going to be growing underneath the snow. The food is going to be very similar to other areas in that animals will eat other animals. And those that aren't carnivores, the smaller animals, the fish as well, are going to subsist or live mostly off of the algae that's going to be growing underneath the ice or on the ice as well, and in the water. So, the four things that every habitat needs to have: food, water, shelter, and space. Don't forget it.